Morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's Public Works Committee. I want to thank Councillor Pasuta for joining us. He's a man outstanding in his field and joined us from there. Members of the public are advised that our meetings are webcast live by the City of Hamilton and temporarily archived on the city's website. Other individuals in the media may also be audibly and or visually recorded at this meeting. I remind everyone about their cell phones, Blackberries. If they go off, we'll stop the meeting while you leave to take your call. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Added as item 8.7, an information report respecting delegated authority for records of site collection. 8.8, PW Report 14057, respecting delegated authority for records of site collection. 1.9, revised motion on tree removal, correcting the address, as Councillor Jackson pointed out, to 314 East 31st Street. Item 9.1, motion to waive the rules respecting the reconsideration of the removal of outstanding business list items, 1 and 2 of Report 14-006. 9.3, a motion respecting two-way traffic study of Wentworth Street and Sanford Avenue. And item 9.4, motion respecting two-way traffic conversion of Victoria Avenue North.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. May I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Moved by Jackson, seconded by Ferguson. All those in favor? Carried. Motion's carried. Declarations or interest or anything before us here? Councillor Ferguson,
Yeah,
please.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to declare an interest on item 8.1 as it involves the taxi.
Point 1, so noted. The other members of the committee? Clerk, there is that one item of interest. Members of the committee, you have before you are the minutes of our June the 2nd meeting. Any errors or omissions? Councillor Jackson, please.
So, Mr. Chairman, just to match up to what the legislative assistant said under today's 9.1 on page 7 of the old minutes, then I just want to make it commensurate with today's 9.1. You'll see paragraph I, Roman numeral I, at the bottom of page 7 of the minutes. That should have been 314 East 31st Street, just to make it all consistent. Okay? Other than that, I'll be happy to move the minutes
So on a
as
motion
amended.
by Jackson, second by Pasuta to approve the June 2nd Public Works Committee meeting minutes as adjusted. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Delegation requests. We have a delegation request from Brian Tisdale respecting traffic on Sanford Avenue South. Mr. Tisdale has asked for the committee to consider him as a delegation for today's meeting. A motion by Marula, second by McCaddy to allow the delegation. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. We have before you a number of consent items. I'll go through them individually. Item 5.1, intersection control list, wards 1, 2, 8, 10, and 15. I have a motion to approve the recommendation, moved by Ferguson, seconded by McCaddy. Also in favor? Carried. Item 5.2 is the traffic issue on Sanford. So we'll set that one aside until we allow Mr. Tisdale to make his presentation. Item 5.3 is the long-term energy plan. Councillor Ferguson, please.
It's just a question to staff, probably to Jeff. Jeff, we referred this back to you after being petitioned by another municipality to take hydro over the next 5 years. And I referred that back to staff because I want to make sure it's factual and not just political rhetoric before we take a position. And I don't see a definitive answer here, although you say you are expecting a 6% increase in hydro rates next year and 9% increase in street light. The street light's a different issue, I understand that. So 6 times 5 would be a 30%. So is there no definitive answer? Is the long-term energy plan that you made reference to talk about a 42% increase in energy prices over the next 5 years? And if it doesn't, where does this come from?
Mr. Lupton?
Through you, Mr. Chair. When it comes to setting electricity prices in Ontario, it's always heavily influenced or politicized in terms of price. The projections through the long-term energy plan, we're talking rate increases as high as 42, 45%. I expect that there will definitely be increases, whether they're at that magnitude or not. As we've seen through history, there's always points where there comes in, there's political will to deal with the electricity rates. I would probably plan on or think that it would be fair to say that electricity rates would continue to increase probably about 5%, 6% a year for the next 5 years. The long-term energy plan tends to get revised every 3 years, but it's reviewed annually. And in that long-term energy plan, they take into account current generation capacity, the state of the economy and where things are going. And depending on how that forecast looks like, it might have an influence in terms of the energy rates. The facts with the whole electricity industry right now is that it's got aging infrastructure, whether it be distribution, transmission, or generation. We have a lot of long-term commitments in terms of the global adjustment with various forms of generation. So it's definitive in the long term. It's hard to put a number on it, but I would, I think 5%, 6% a year for the next few years is not unreasonable to expect.
Okay, I think I heard that answer, Mr. Chairman, through you to Jeff, that no, there is no definitive position that rates are going to go up 42% over the next 5 years. There may be increases, but those increases have not been determined yet. And that confirms exactly what my local MPP told me. He says with the cancellation of 50% of the Samsung agreement, that's going to have a significant impact on reducing costs because hydro consumption is way down because of conservation. And they don't need to build all these expensive forms of creating energy, which is the windmills and the solar units. So I think, Mr. Chair, it might be appropriate we simply receive this report then because it's not definitive. It's just something that's out there, and it isn't an official position of the government yet. So I'd move that if you like. We're on 5.3. I'll move the be received.
Thank you. You spoke to it. I want to see if there's any other members of the committee that wish to speak to this item. Seeing none, I'll go back to Councillor Ferguson for the motion, second by Councillor Powers. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. So at 5.4, bridge structure inspection protocols. Is there any discussion on item 5.4? Councillor Powers.
I was partly responsible for sending this back, particularly as related to the private structures, bridges within our golf courses and other ones. And I'm pleased with the report. I think the information is there. I want the assurance, and I believe I have the assurance in the report that there is ongoing inspections, and if indeed there's deficiencies, we'll deal with them in a timely manner and not create liabilities. So if there's no other speakers, come back to me and I'll move receipt of the report.
Thank you. I have no other speakers, so I will come back to Councillor Powers for the receipt of the report. Second by Councillor Marula. Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. 5.5, and I see we have some very interested individuals in the crowd. Welcome to the Public Works Committee, guys. Okay, also, excuse me, I have the Ward 3 councillor as well. This is the Family Bike Skills Park. Is there any discussion on item 5.5? Would the Ward councillor wish to speak to it?
No, I am very supportive and want to welcome the people here.
Thank you. You have Councillor Powers and then Councillor Normal.
I want to certainly commend the residents, the family members, and the young people themselves for putting together this proposal. It's great that we can invest in this. It sounds like it's the perfect location and a perfect program, and I think it could very well become a template for other possibilities throughout the city. So I thank you for your initiative, and I thank all of you for your initiative.
Thank you. Councillor Merlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I too want to congratulate particularly the students or the youth within East Hamilton that brought forward this presentation at our Public Works Committee. I also want to thank staff for moving quite expeditiously on this particular item, and I truly look forward to it coming to fruition. But again, it would be remiss of us not to thank those young East Hamilton residents who were instrumental in this happening. So I just want to take that opportunity.
Thank you, and I'll pass the chair over to, I guess it's Councillor Marula as the Vice Chair. And I also want to thank those individuals that come forward. This is really, truly a grassroots initiative. And when we take a look at what transpires in this community, it really is from the ground up. When you take a look at the skateboard park that is now up by the police station on Stone Church, that is a direct result of a grassroots presentation by many youth that were interested in skateboarding. So I have been a big, strong advocate at some point, being a city of our size, to eventually get to a BMX track. This is a step towards that and developing some of those basic skills. And I know that the road that you hold, the road that you cleared, the path that you cleared, is going to make it easier for us to consider those types of long-term issues in the future. So once again, thank you very much for your efforts. I'll take the chair back and look for a motion to receive. Moved by Councillor Merla, second by Councillor Ferguson. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Minutes of various subcommittee meetings. Is there any discussion on 5, 6A, B, or C? Moved by Councillor Ferguson, second by Councillor Pasuta. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Now, I believe we have a 5.2, we have a delegation. That's Brian Tisdale, respecting traffic on Sanford Avenue South. Mr. Tisdale, can you please come down to the mic? So, Mr. Tisdale, you have 5 minutes.
Okay, I'll just wait for the handouts to get to you. Good morning, committee members, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brian Tisdale. I'm a long-term resident of Hamilton. I'm actively involved in things in the city, like the Chief of Police Advisory Board, and I'm a member of the Property Standards Committee. I've lived at 97 Sanford Avenue for the past 25 years. You have before you a petition that's been signed by a good majority of the residents of Sanford Avenue. This was presented to council in July of 2012, and it was deferred or handed over to the manager of Public Works. It has been on your agenda a number of times, but been deferred because they're awaiting a staff report. So I'm hopeful today that that staff report is available. What I've done is I've taken a number of pictures, and the first one you'll see, 4 posts. These are 10-inch steel posts filled with concrete. The owner of the building, it used to be Mackessy's Appliances there on the corner. He's put those in, no doubt because his insurance company is tired of people driving through his building. Those would stop a tractor trailer, let alone a car. They would decimate a car. On the posts to the left of it, you'll see a commemorative wreath that has been maintained for the past 7 or 8 years by the families of a young Portuguese couple that were killed at that corner. They were on their way to a soccer game in Mississauga, and a Cadillac SUV came through there and just totaled the car. The car disintegrated. They found pieces of the car up on top of the roof of Mackessy's. The next picture you'll see is a full picture of the building that used to be Mackessy's with the pillars out front. And you can see the don't walk sign there. The lights at the corner are synchronized. And you know, when you go along Main Street, if you maintain a speed of approximately 30 miles an hour, that you can run every light and hit them. But if you're out if your speed's not right, you're going to hit on that light when it just turning red, or before it turns green, rather, and you're going to run the light. There's a red light camera at the corner, and I'm sure that it's one of the busiest red light cameras in the city, because we can be sitting out on our front porch on a summer night, and you can watch that thing flash constantly. So there's only a 3-second lapse. So if somebody's coming down Sanford Avenue, and they see the don't walk signs flashing, don't walk, they gun it. And they're running the light going down. And we get somebody on Main Street running the light coming the other way, and they collide. There's been all kinds of accidents. The accident I mentioned to you about the young Portuguese couple, I just happened to be sitting at the corner of Main Street driving a friend of mine to work, and I witnessed the accident, and I was the first on the scene. And it was terrible. With those balusters, more people are going to die. On the next picture, you'll see a fire hydrant, which is just to the east of that building. That fire hydrant should be on a flexible hose where it tips this way and that way, because it's been nailed so many times. They've replaced it now, put new concrete around it, and you hit a fire hydrant, you're going to know it. The next picture is of the red light camera aiming east on Main Street to catch people running the light going down Main. And like I say, it's probably one of the most busy red light cameras in town. The next picture you see is a picture aiming down Sanford. You can see the don't walk signs are flashing red. And up on the right corner, you'll see a sign that says, warning, red light camera. Well, Bernie Morelli put that up a number of years ago, hoping that people would see that and think that there was a red light camera going to nail them going through Sanford. Well, it didn't work. You know, it's like putting an owl up to stop the pigeons. As soon as they get used to it, it doesn't work. So what we've been hoping for in it, this thing ended up getting blown out of proportion as far as we're concerned. They were going to do an environmental assessment to decide whether to change the street to two-way. Well, we need parking on both sides because there's 2 apartment buildings that don't provide parking on the street. And as you'll see from that picture, the parking's full. We also have a Jehovah's Witness church, and we also have a Russian Orthodox church down at the corner. So on Sundays, it's jammed. So we need to maintain both side parking. We got that back finally, I would say in the mid-90s. It used to be rush hour parking was, you couldn't park on the right-hand side, on the east side for rush hour. Those days are gone. DeFasco, Stelco, Westinghouse, National Steel Car. These people do not have JIKs, don't have the employees. The traffic isn't there that's necessary to have a one-way running like crazy, but I don't know if there's enough space on the street to have two-way. All we're really asking for is if we could have the speed bumps that they have on Charlton Avenue. They have speed bumps between Queen and Locke, and I believe they've got a speed reduction on the street. That's what we want. We want to reduce the speed. We want to some way limit them from running the light. On Thursday night, we were having a little meeting amongst us regarding this, and a white Camaro came around the corner off Delaware. The red lights were flashing at the corner, and he nailed it, running down the street. And that happens in the summertime. It's really bad when the kids are going to party downtown on Friday and Saturday nights. They just go like crazy. So I'd like you to consider this when it comes up. At least give us the speed bumps and the reduced speed limit. Say to 30, I guess. I don't know. But there's kids on the street. It's downright dangerous. Okay? And that concludes what I've got to say. Any questions?
Councillor Ferguson.
Just one question. There's a staff report before us today. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to read it yet, but it does recommend that we reduce the speed limit to 40 kilometers per hour. Is that satisfactory now to you, if we approve that?
The speed limit, unless you got police there nailing them, the speed bumps, I think we need the speed bumps in conjunction with a reduced speed limit.
Of course, the counter-argument to that is always that emergency vehicles makes for a patient in an EMS ambulance going down the road very difficult when they bounce over those things. And
Well, the ones on Charlton have the chevrons to warn you. They got a sign, speed bumps. If that's not adequate warning, you shouldn't have a license.
I just talked about emergency vehicles who have to.
Oh, emergency vehicles. Oh, yeah, I've seen the police speed down the street.
But it's an uncomfortable thing to be in an ambulance when.
Yeah, but I'm sure they have emergency vehicles over at on Charlton.
Yeah, oh, no, I agree. I just wondered what your reaction to that would be. That's my question.
So a police cruiser has to slow down for the chevrons for a couple of minutes? I don't know. Would we rather have the police slow down to get down the street or have a few more dead bodies at the corner of Sanford?
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily, Mr. Chairman, to you, I wasn't necessarily thinking of police. I was thinking of EMS, where there's a patient in the back, or fire truck that doesn't have very good suspension with the number of firefighters in there. But I just want to get your reaction to that. I think I've got it, so thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, and just for clarification, I don't know if anyone here can answer, there is actually a few seconds, every bump, there's a few seconds delay, whether it's ambulance or fire. And more speed bumps you have, more delay it creates, and then that's what people need to at least be aware of, because you could actually lose lives in the timing it takes for that ambulance to get where it needs to get in a very timely
We're
fashion.
talking a one-block stretch.
Okay, thank you.
It's not like it's the whole street.
I have Councillor McCaddy.
Mr. Chair, I think what Mr. Tisdale is talking about is we're actually going to create dead bodies. You're talking about ambulances, but in fact, we're going to create more injuries or serious injuries unless we fix this. I guess, Mr. Tisdale, your point, and I entirely agree with it, that the 40-kilometer-per-hour speed limit is helpful.
Yeah.
But unless you've got a police car sitting there 24/7. Unless you physically change the road in some way with rumble strips or something along those lines.
Yep.
Is that your sense,
That's right.
being there every day?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the police can't be there every day.
No.
But the rumble strips will certainly slow them down.
And the one-way, two-way conversion...
Doesn't matter either way to us. We think that we may lose the parking if it goes to two-way.
Yeah, that's a concern.
We can't lose it.
Right, okay. Well, I certainly have lots of questions for staff when we get to that point. Thanks, Mr.
So parking's no problem for me. I've got enough parking for 9 cars on my property because I've got a double lot. So, but for the rest of the street, it's a problem. Thank you.
Thank you. I got a couple others. I got Councillor Powers and then Councillor Morrow.
Oh.
Mr. Tisdale, just help me I'll have questions for staff when it comes up, but in the petition, it just talks about Sanford Avenue South.
Right.
The staff report only talks about the block between Delaware and Main Street.
Correct.
So is that...
Confined area.
Is blank,
Yep.
I'm going to call it petition, what they're suggesting match what you're asking for? Is that
Yes.
singular block?
From Sanford, or from Delaware to Maine. The other end of Sanford going up towards Cumberland
Yes, sir.
is already two-way, and it doesn't get the traffic we get. We're getting the traffic coming down the Wentworth Hill.
Okay, so that's kind of at Delaware is kind of you make the bend and
Yeah, they come down Wentworth,
Okay.
come across Delaware, and then shoot down.
thank you for the clarity. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Morrow.
Thanks. Mr. Chairman, in case Mr. Tisdale wonders, I'm not on the committee, hence I can't vote, in case you wonder what I'm doing over on the side.
But you can speak out.
I can speak, however, you're right. And I do support what he's saying. I've found over many years that neighborhood residents who observe issues on a daily basis are usually the best experts and come up with the best solutions, particularly when they've thought about it over a number of years and seen the results of inaction. So I would ask the committee to at least bring a report back on the speed bumps, if at all possible, the speed limit as well, in conjunction with that, and would certainly support it strongly at council and appreciate the efforts on the part of the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Marula.
Mr. Chairman, just I guess what I'm...
Questions to the...
Oh, no, actually to staff on the speed hump issue, so I'll wait until you're done.
I'll put you on that list. Okay, I'll pass the chair over to Councillor Marilla. And I really appreciate, again, a grassroots initiative to take a look at a real serious concern. I just went through it on a cut-through street. And the reason why, and that we're looking at it on scenic as well, in regards to traffic calming, there's things like chicanes, the speed bumps, and the, what's it called, the
Chevrons?
the rumble strips. It's picking the right traffic calming solution for the area that's probably more important. Have you considered, because you just talked about speed bumps, but you would be open to any of the three that I've identified, or you're specifically looking at speed bumps?
No, I don't know the difference between a rumble strip and a speed bump. What I've seen over on Charlton, what is that? A rumble strip or a speed bump?
It's a speed hump.
Speed bump?
Hump.
They're a bit more gradual.
Yeah, we'd have no problem with that. But
Yeah, I want to try to get a sense on it. So it's clear that you're okay with that, but are you, if traffic come back and indicate that it might be more appropriate in that location, you utilize another solutions such as the ones I listed, you'd be okay with that as well?
we're okay, as long as it slows traffic down.
That's the purpose of it, and really appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
I take the chair back. I see no further discussion, so I need a motion to receive the delegation. So moved by Councillor Marilla, second by Councillor Jackson. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Yeah.
And at this point, we do have some reservations to talk to staff and ask questions. We are bringing 5.2 back to for consideration now. And I would ask Councillor McCaddy, Councillor Marilla, Councillor Jackson, anyone else on the list to ask staff direct questions? No? Okay, go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And Martin, you've got this one. It's your report. So you've looked at the area, and I think you've heard the discussion. We've had lots of discussions in the past where changing the speed limit is helpful, certainly, but it really requires a physical change on the road. You've taught me that, in order to change the behavior of the drivers. Now, it looks like parking on both sides, which is a form of traffic calming, just not intentional, but it is. I know we get into the main arterials and the different categories of the road in terms of what traffic calming we can use. I don't know if that's our own rules or provincial rules. So I wonder if you can maybe just touch on that first. What type of road this is, what we would have to do to change that designation, perhaps, if we wanted to go a bit further than you've got us today. Mr. Chair.
Through the chair, Councillor, there is no legislative classification of roadway that we have to work to. It's standard operating practice. It's best practice in the industry that we're trying to work to. Obviously, we don't want to put traffic calming devices on arterial roadways, high volume roadways. The use of Sanford in this area to the residents is very residential. It feels residential. However, I think a lot of people use this route to cut from the Mountain Access down to Barton Street and points east and west along Barton. This wouldn't be an ideal location for a speed bump. One of the things that, as I looked at this piece of roadway, as you mentioned, the parking is providing the traffic calming. Any further traffic calming is going to start removing the parking on the street, and we were very sensitive to that when we reviewed the street. The other thing I would say is, and as your discussion is going to come up later, there's a one-way to two-way conversion issue with the street, and I didn't want to start spending some substantial amount of money to install speed bumps only to have them removed if we were converting the street. The citizen noted that there's parking on both sides. To run this one way to two-way, we would then have to remove parking on one way or on one side of the street to allow vehicles to pass each other. So I hope that answered your question.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Martin, just looking at the one photograph that Mr. Tisdale provided, it does show the parking on both sides. It looks like there are still 2 lanes available there, although it's hard to tell for sure. Is that the case? There's still 2 lanes in addition to the cars parked on both sides?
It would be my opinion that the amount of room left is not sufficient to operate two-way traffic.
Yeah, because they're pretty skinny lanes, I guess, by that. Yeah, so if that's, I mean, that's a discussion. I don't know what the parking need is. I mean, the parking need looks pretty significant from this picture, but I don't know on a daily basis, a weekly basis, whether it fluctuates. And Mr. Chair, you haven't done that level of study yet. Is that right, Martin?
Councillor, we've looked at the parking, and it seems to be heavily parked most of the time during the day when we've been there.
Okay. Well, it seems to me that we need to act on this. It's there's been fatalities in the area, and the speed hump design. Mr. Tisdale mentioned the Charlton ones, and I'm trying to remember what that is designed to have the vehicles slow down to, because they are designed in a certain way to reduce the speed from 50 or perhaps higher down to, is it 40? Is it 40 kilometers per hour to go over those speed humps in a comfortable way if you're driving a car?
Through the chair, everything is designed for a 40 kilometer per hour reduction in the speed. One of the reasons is that 30 is, we're experimenting with that in the north end, but we're under the orders of the OMB, and no other streets in Hamilton can be reduced to 30 while that project is underway. So we only can go down to 40 at the present time. Our report indicates that you'll be looking at shortly that staff is recommending a 40 kilometer per hour speed limit. I would caution that if we do install a speed hump, and we can, it will reduce some parking. We have to clear the area around the speed hump so that there's adequate visibility of the hump, as we did on Charlton in Ward 1.
Yeah, I don't recall that on some of the other speed humps. We've allowed people to park over the hump because they're on the side of the street, and the humps aren't that high. You can park over them. In any case, I think this is unfortunately a very inadequate recommendation. No criticism of staff, but it's not going to achieve the results that Mr. Tisdale is desiring whatsoever. I really think that we need a form of traffic calming here in addition to the speed. I would hope that staff will have recommendations on what the traffic calming could be. Otherwise, we could see more fatalities, as Mr. Tisdale described.
Thank you, Councillor McCaddy. I have Councillor Merla.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just through staff, I recall back in 2002 or 3, we initiated a motion, I believe it was Councillor Collins and I, surrounding the speed hump program. At that time, Hart Solomon somehow resisted the initiative, but ultimately there was a report that was produced, and we had assessed a number of streets that would meet the criteria. The issue at that time, and still is, probably more so today than then, is the fact that these speed humps do take away parking spots. And in the older part of the city, we know that that's becoming more and more of a premium. Having said that, through you, Mr. Chairman, to whoever would like to expand upon this, could we perhaps have that report sent to us again, where we identified, firstly, the criteria to which these speed humps become accepted, and secondly, the streets that were identified back in that time period? For you, Mr. Chairman. So it will be offline, it doesn't have to be today, but if you could send that information, it'd be greatly appreciated.
Through the chair, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, I have Councillor Powers.
I think we should move ahead with the recommendation immediately to reduce it down to 40. What 40 means is they'll speed to 50. With 50, they travel at 60 and that, so I think we need to deal with this. I've certainly have gone through the iterations of the rumble strips, the speed bumps, the speed humps. I'm a major supporter of speed humps. The reason is that the speed bumps, vehicles over them, whether they're delivery vehicles or personal vehicles, if you go over a speed bump, you'll get sounds coming from the vehicle. The vehicle will go up, and either at speed, it kind of goes a little bit airborne, whereas a speed hump situation, they kind of tend to slow down, flatten out, and go over. I mean, they're very, very evident in the United States, where when I'm down in Florida, they're substantially there. I know in Scotland, they're built into the road systems. They've got the same challenges that we have from a winter maintenance standpoint, is that, you know, they're able to run the snow plows, plow them properly. Speed bumps cause some challenges for our equipment, and in a lot of cases, they end up getting peeled off by the snow plow. So I'm resistant to speed bumps. I'm a major supporter of speed humps from that standpoint. The ripple strips, they very, very clearly create a noise factor. We had some in Dundas on Cross Street, coming from the driving park down towards the town area in front of St. Paul Church. We had ripple strips there. At the request of the residents, we worked and had those removed, because when you came down, it not only gave you an audible in the vehicle, it gave an audible in the neighborhood also from the sounds. So I think we move on the recommendation now. I think Councillor Marula's suggestion is we pull back Mr. Solomon's report and revisit it. I know we put some speed humps on Lake Avenue to assist Councillor Clark with the challenges that were going on there. Also, the issue about speed humps is some of the designs is we put them in the traveled surface, not right to the sides. It allows for the drainage. In other words, if it's on a downslope on the road, it still allows the water to run down, find its way to the catch basin, doesn't pool behind it, causes some challenges. So I think we approve what we've got here, and then Councillor Marula provide a subsequent one and ask for the supplementary report or the old information to come back for us to see where we can help to make a difficult situation better for the ward councillor and his residents. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I concur with Councillor Powers. I would hope the delegation on behalf of the petitioners would hopefully appreciate that at least the report gets a recommendation down to 40 as a starting point. And the two-way conversion, Martin, I understand, to Manager White, that study is running concurrently with this report to go to 40. Part of what you're bringing back for this committee that Councillor Marula's requested, Martin, to refresh my memory, could you separate and tell me exactly again what speed bumps, speed humps, rumble strips, maybe you could do a delineation of what all three are, the pros and cons, and maybe just as part of the report Councillor Marula's asked for, because I know I get confused from time to time when constituents ask me as well. Mr. Chairman, lastly, through you to Martin. Martin, on page 2 of your report today about your recommendation, in your paragraph, first paragraph on page 2, you see, results of the studies indicate Sanford Avenue is operating safely. And you know, Martin, you and I have had this discussion before, even up in my area, when residents who live on the street say, yeah, it's fine, Councillor, for the professionals, the traffic engineers to say it's operating safely, but all they need to do is live on my street and they see the near misses and the number of times that the police have been called. So, Martin, I'm just curious, maybe just a comment or explanation, your staff report saying results of your current studies on Sanford is indicating operating safely. Mr. Chairman, through you to Martin, just for a professional comment on that, please.
Through the chair, I guess those terminology is subjective, and I will acknowledge that. However, if you go later in the report, there is some information about the number of collisions that have occurred on the street, and it's broken down by location, and I won't pull that out, but that data is available in the report. There are some collisions on the street. There's no doubt about that. So, again, it's subjective. We didn't record any fatalities in our review, and all we can go on is the results of what police services provides to us. So if there's a collision reported to the police department, that is the information we have available, and I am cognizant that the citizens would obviously see more because they're there on a full-time basis.
Appreciate that, Martin. And also I heard from the delegation they don't want to lose parking either. So I think, in my humble opinion, not being the ward councillor, and I'm very sensitive to the ward councillor's desire here, but I think to move at least on the 40K, have the other reports come back. We don't want to lose parking is what I heard the delegation say. Two-way conversion study is underway. You're going to delineate what's a strip, what's a bump, what's a hump. I think all that will be important moving forward. So I'm supportive of what's here before us today, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Morrow.
Yeah, I appreciate the response here, but I encourage as fast a response as possible. It's obviously a very dangerous situation. I'm sometimes concerned with revisiting old reports because philosophies change and people change and new personalities as well. I think I understand why Councillor Marula is doing that, and it makes sense, but I hope it doesn't become embedded in thoughts that perhaps are no longer as current and useful as they might have been, or might have been thought to be some years ago. So I encourage the committee going as fast as it can, reasonably, and get this problem solved as fast as we can and get something to City Council. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to pass the chair on to Councillor Marula. I do have Councillor McCaddy as the second time speaker, and I believe I'm coming back to Councillor Marula for a motion. So Councillor Marula, you take the chair.
Yes.
Just a couple of questions. Martin, you said that there was a report identifying the accident rates in this particular location. So in the scheme of things, is this mild, moderate, or severe?
I'll refer you to page 4 of 7. We state that there is 6 collisions over 5 years, and I would consider that a low collision rate for a road of this type.
Okay. In this report, you would have ruled out the other options for traffic calming?
I don't think we ruled them out. What we're considering is the fact that at the time of preparation, the Sanford two-way conversion had been referred back to the Transportation Master Plan Review, and we were holding off on making a decision on doing any further adjustments to the curb lines or the design pending the review for the two-way conversion. Had the roadway gone two-way, then we would have had to have done some other work on the street to make it operate properly. That decision hasn't been made finally, and as far as I'm aware, there's a committee will be looking at bringing forward the two-way conversion again today. So some of this is contingent on whether or not we convert it to two-way. I will say that if we were to leave it one way as is and put speed bumps in, we could do that at a relatively nominal cost, $20,000–$25,000, and we could make it function properly with speed bumps operating one way, maintain the existing parking, no bump outs, because anything you do like that starts to remove parking from the abutting residents.
Fair enough. And the defined area of issue and problem, is that a mixed use, or is that a commercial, primary commercial, industrial?
The block we're talking about is strictly residential.
Okay, so clearly it's a high need. Rumble strips probably would be a problem as identified through Councillor McCaddy's experiences. Just want to highlight those issues. I certainly absolutely support anything that we, as councillors, one of the biggest things we find when we go to, even into elections, never mind throughout the year, the biggest complaints is people speeding in neighborhoods, running stop signs, so forth. You hear that over and over again. We know we just don't have the resources. It's back to Councillor McCaddy's comments. It's maybe the road design, and maybe we need to be contemplating those kind of issues on a go-forward basis to ensure that we're doing as much in road design to address those kinds of issues. So I certainly support what Councillor McCaddy or Councillor Marula are both asking for, quite frankly. I think they're synergistic to ensure that we're optimizing every tool in the toolbox to address the issues and concerns raised by this community. So thank you very much. Those are my comments. I'll take the chair back. And Councillor McCaddy, second time.
Thanks, Mr. Sheriff. So I don't know what Councillor Marula's motion is going to say, but it may be that we want to ask staff to evaluate the speed hump model in this case, including what the effect on parking is, because I think Ward 3 Councillor, Councillor Morrow, is going to need that information in order to make that local decision. So we see if that fits with Councillor Marula's motion. If not, maybe come back to me on that.
Yeah, my understanding of Councillor Marula's motion is that there's a pre-existing report that identifies criteria and where and what type of roadways you would utilize these kind of solutions. So that certainly could be what do you call it, a buddy report with the motion and the direction that you're providing through your motion, so that we get both at the same time. I would see as complementary too.
Yeah. So I think as long as it's specifically identified that we evaluate speed humps in this case, how it affects parking, so the Ward 3 councillor can, work with the community on that. If it does require loss of, pick a number, 4 spaces or something like that, then that's information the councillor will have in order to make that decision. My question, though, Councillor Pasuta pointed out on page 3 of the report, it does identify the 3-day speed monitoring studies, which indicated the speeds were in the ballpark of where they were supposed to be, 85th percentile, 48.5 kilometers per hour, and moving it to 40 will be even better on that side. But I'm just wondering whether the problem here is in fact not the speed, if we read that correctly, but it's the intersection itself. And Mr. Tisdale indicated through one of his photographs that when people see the red light ahead, they gun it to make that intersection. And of course, with the consecutive or with the timed Main Street lights, people are waiting for that light to change, and often, as you know, slow down a little bit, waiting for the red to change. But they're still cruising as they hit the light on the Main Street side, so they're moving as well. So I'm just wondering if there was an analysis of the intersection itself through you to Martin or his group, whether we could look at hooding the traffic lights to hide the light color, whether it be the actual traffic light itself or the pedestrian walking light, so that the drivers can't see it and react to it in the way that they have. If it's not the speed, which I think that's what I take from the staff report, they're kind of saying go 40, but it's not going to be a big deal. What about the intersection itself, which seems like the problem?
To the chair, we did not look at dimming or, hooding the traffic signals at all. I would like to look at that and make sure we can do it safely. One of the things that we always want to make sure is that motorists have the proper visibility of a traffic signal so that they can act appropriately. You're supposed to slow down on amber and stop on red, not accelerate, but we still need to make sure that the motorist has the ability to see the signal so he can react in due time and stop at the red light. So I'd like the opportunity to come back with that and take a look at it further. It's not something that I would want to do without properly looking at how it can be done.
Yes, Mr. Chair, maybe we can include that in the motion as well. If we're going to report back, let's include those 2 items, evaluation of the speed humps, parking issues, and then the intersection itself. Thanks.
At this point, Councillor Marula has the request to bring the former report back. I see that as a companion piece, if Councillor Marula agrees.
Mr. Chairman, my whole point is that I don't want to reinvent the wheel. We did all of this work already. The policy exists. All of the variables that have been mentioned are already built into that report. All we need to do is cross-reference that report to what the present-day problem is that was presented today, and it's really that simple.
Okay, but I think there's the other issue is, as identified by Councillor McCaddy, with the in the report it identified that the percentile and the speeding doesn't seem to be as much of an issue as maybe the intersection challenge.
Right.
So
okay, and I have no problem with including that as well. As long, we can have it all encompassing. I'm just saying my intent for what I'd mentioned earlier was just
with that
specifically,
matrix. Yeah.
Exactly, not to reinvent the wheel. And Councillor Morrow is correct. Things have changed a lot in 12 years, particularly surrounding 40-kilometer speed limits. So in essence, I have no problem marrying what Councillor McCaddy has said into this as well as an item B. Another component, Mr. Chairman, is I noticed that in Cmte, and traveling to Ottawa on the weekend, they have these community safety zones, and they have 40-kilometer speed limits within those community safety zones that have been identified. Through you to staff, whoever would like to answer this, do we have anything similar to that? I know that we have these school zones, but what I read as a signage was community safety zones specifically and a 40-kilometer limit.
Through the chair, Councillor, we don't presently. However, Public Works is working on a report, which I hope you will see in August, on road safety in Hamilton, and we're going to be proposing a number of initiatives, and that would fall in line with that sort of approach. And I have some other concepts. I think we need to do a better job with our road safety programs in Hamilton, and we're coming forward with a way and means to do that. And so I hopefully when you see the report in August, you will find some of those things in it. We do hope to bring forward more safety items for pedestrians, seniors, and the motoring public.
And the ones that I did encounter seem to be areas that just simply are adjacent to the 401 as an example. So when someone's traveling at 120 kilometers an hour, having to take an exit, obviously the people are inclined to speed far more often under those conditions. But with the proper signage and lighting, it's definitely got my attention, and for a number of reasons. But having said that, it's something that I think is important, identifying those hot areas or spots, similar to Kenilworth Avenue South, and identifying them as community safety zones, and then incorporating that 40 kilometers accordingly. So I'll wait for the report, and I won't include it in this motion, but I guess I can provide as a notice that that is my intent once that report comes forward.
Thank you, Councillor Marilla. So, Councillor McCaddy, move your motion, and I believe the context of your motion can contain, as a companion piece, the former study and the application of those particular solutions. I think it would just be natural anyway.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, I like the idea of a Part B to the motion, Councillor Marilla's motion, that identifies specifically the evaluation of the traffic speed hump option, parking implications, as one part of that, and the second part being an examination of the intersection itself, as we discussed a moment ago.
Thank you. So that's formally moved motion by Councillor McCaddy, second by Councillor Marilla. Councillor Morrow.
Councillor Collins brought to my attention 9.3. Is that what you're moving?
No.
This is different. Okay. Oh, okay. Could I ask that this be incorporated? Makes sense. And speed humps specifically. Yeah. Deals with Sanford. If it's convenient to do so. If not, Councillor Collins says they can do it separate.
Can I suggest this? This sort of dovetails on the discussion we're having. Why? It's completely separate? Okay, so I just want to get a sense from the committee. Councillor McCaddy.
Mr. Chair, I think it is separate, and the reason I would say that is I think there's a short term and a long term to this project. So the short term would be Councillor Marilla and the additional item I added. Short term, and then the one-way, two-way should be consecutive, should occur. The analysis should consider at the same time.
So, Madam Clerk, do you have the motion? Can you read it? Do you have it in front of you?
Councillor McCaddy's motion?
Yes.
The way I captured it is to evaluate the speed hump model and its effect on parking in the area, and to look at intersection safety specifically.
That's an A. Staff okay with that? Yep. Okay, Councillor Marilla, you okay with that? All those, any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. Great discussion.
5.2 to lower to the 40.
Absolutely. Councillor Jackson moves that we bring it down to 40. Councillor McCaddy seconds that. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. So now we're in just public hearings and so we did that. We're at presentations, 7.1. We have now a presentation respecting the role of transportation planning and mobility programs in the Transportation Division. I call on staff to come forward to make their presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alan Kirkpatrick, Manager of our transportation planning section will be giving the presentation, and he's asked to move it along quickly, and hopefully you'll enjoy the presentation.
Morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Al Kirkpatrick, and I'm the Manager of Transportation Planning in the Public Works Department. This presentation is a continuation of a series of staff presentations on the varied roles and responsibilities and outcomes of the Public Works Department. And this morning, I'd like to take this opportunity to present the roles of the Transportation Planning Group in the Transportation Division. So within the Transportation Division, Don Hall is the director, and there are 7 sections within the Hamilton Street Railway Division and the Transportation Division. And then within my area, there are additional 7 areas that I'd like to provide highlighted information on. Transportation planning touches the community on a daily basis throughout the majority of the city. We are involved in and support a number of initiatives such as neighborhood plans, economic development and goods movement, public health, commuting, both to work and to school, and numerous leisure activities, to name a few. There are a number of guiding principles that staff use, including the city's official plan, which does make reference to transportation, including the balanced transportation network, to offer choices for walking, cycling, transit, and to recognize the importance of goods movement to the local economy. In addition, the city's strategic corporate plan is another key document that refers to the importance of transportation planning through prosperity and public health. The objective is to improve the city's transportation system to support multimodal mobility and encourage interregional connections. The key document for our purposes is the Transportation Master Plan, which was approved in 2007 and is currently being updated. This review is to look at the assumptions that were previously made and the projections looking at our horizon of 2031 and also 2041. The transportation plan looks at policies and strategies for the overall network, including the importance of roads, transit, cycling, walking, and cities' connections for rail, marine, and aviation facilities. In addition, we're hoping that the Transportation Master Plan will be looking at decision-making structure to consider priorities and timing for various initiatives. Another key component of the citywide Transportation Master Plan will be the review of the citywide network, which has been alluded to earlier this morning. Another key document that we utilize is the Rapid Ready Report, which was approved in 2013. And again, there are 3 key initiatives to support rapid transit investment: integrated transit network and growing ridership, creating supportive land uses throughout the communities, and developing a seamless multimodal transportation system. From the Citywide Transportation Master Plan, there was a recommended document to include emphasis on pedestrian mobility, as the needs are increasing as time goes on. Pedestrian mobility as a transportation component has a significant benefit to the health of our community through active transportation. And again, this document is legislative and has inspirational commitments to health, sustainability, complete communities where people choose to walk. Another recommended document from the Transportation Master Plan was the Cycling Master Plan to provide a vision of an integrated and connected cycling network for transportation needs and leisure needs for the residents of the city. Key legislative document that we utilize is the environmental assessment process, and it's a comprehensive process to examine projects to ensure that they are comprehensively planned, analyzed with well-established recommended solutions, including public input and consultation through engagement. Again, the EA process deals with municipal roads in our case, potential effects on the environment, including natural, social, cultural, constructed, and environmental issues. All of these elements reach across the entire city and link closely with our neighbors, both regions and adjacent municipalities. Specific examples are we are doing much of the work already. These are two examples of pedestrian refuge islands in Ancaster on the left and pedestrian facilities in Westdale on the right. We have utilized the 880 concepts before with our pedestrian system. And again, the process is number one, think of an older adult, followed by think of a child, and would you send them out together to walk to the park? And if you would, is it safe enough? And if you wouldn't, what needs to be improved? As far as our cycling network goes, we are continuing to enhance our right-of-way. Currently, we have 155 kilometers of bike lanes, 7 kilometers of sharrows throughout the city, 20 kilometers of paved shoulders in rural areas. And there's a high demand for information on cycling throughout the city, so we utilize a popular communications device such as our cycling map and also extensive information on the webpage. You're familiar with our bike share program, which is going to be implemented in July of this year and will also coincide with the emphasis for cycling for the Pan Am Games next year. In addition, we have an extensive partnership with our public health colleagues and the school boards for a school bike rack program. We have 20 locations and 12 pending, and this is part of the Active and Safe Routes to School program that we are encouraging. For goods movement, there are the City of Hamilton is a leading candidate and example of a North American gateway for goods movement through strategic partnerships with air, marine, trucking, rail, and other related businesses. The key issues we look at here are competitive pressures, both internal, such as traffic congestion, and external, potentially having businesses move out of the city, going to other locations because of transportation. Truck movements, compatible road network, and connections and access are very important. Trucking data, we try to work closely with our partners and businesses to find out what their needs are through extensive analysis. Economic development, anticipated continued growth in the city, increased demand for all types of freight transportation, enhancing our port authority and international airport are very high on our list. From an environmental point of view, increasing low cost and green alternatives such as rail and marine are important to us. The role of the port is a diverse and dynamic environment that supports a mixture of uses through our natural resource here at the harbor for business opportunities, and the airport is an exciting opportunity for continued growth in the heart of the Golden Horseshoe without the problems associated with the Pearson Airport. And finally, the role of the railways. We're very lucky to have both CP and CN in our community with opportunities for increased container shipment, rail-to-road systems, and just-in-time delivery is very important to them. Of course, we're within the Transportation Division and closely associated with HSR, so our goals are to increase ridership, reduce congestion, encourage transit-supported development through nodes and corridors, connections to interregional transit, transportation needs for both youth and the aging population, future rapid transit opportunities, and looking at key transit investments in the future. Our group gets involved in several special events. One of them is the upcoming Pan Am Games. So our group is working on extensive transportation planning for the Games route network for the athletes and spectators. Through transportation demand management principles, we are encouraging the use of public transit, cycling, and walking, and there will be some parking, but that will be the third priority on our list. And we'll be offering free transit to spectators with game day tickets in order for them to use that form of transportation. We are welcoming a third of the ticketed spectators to Hamilton to a safe and convenient transportation system for their enjoyment of this international event. Staff are also involved in the Niagara to GTA project. We're working closely with the Western Golden Horseshoe Municipal Network partners to get involved with the provincial planning in this project. The plan is not so much about the corridor, but about the future economic well-being of the city and the region, with transportation as a key component to this ongoing success. As far as the road network, again, we have examples of what we are already doing, providing wider sidewalks, green streets and landscaping improvements, transit bays, bicycle lanes and bicycle parking, and high visibility crosswalks for our citizens. A new component that we're reviewing is called Complete Streets, and gaining a lot of attention both in the City of Hamilton and throughout North America. The principle is to design and operate and enable safe access for all users, pedestrians, cyclists, transit riders, and goods movement operators of all ages and abilities. To be able to safely move along and across the complete street is one of our key goals. We are also looking to deliver an acceptable level of service for all modes, not favoring one mode over the other. So for pedestrians, we're wanting to provide adequate unobstructed walking space, adequate lighting, benches, trees, and have walkable destinations with frequent crossings. Complete Street is a place. We're trying to encourage it to be a destination in themselves, including sidewalk dining, social gatherings, exercise, and relaxation. As far as transit, including connectivity, bicycle and pedestrian network, functional shelters, prioritized travel ways, coordinated land use planning, bike planning, parking, lighting, and walkable distances between stops. For the cyclists, comfortable aspects and environments to share the road, also encouraging bike parking, intersection treatments, and destinations by bike in order to allow the cyclists to encourage them to utilize that infrastructure. The value is that it has been shown enhance property values, support commerce such as through sidewalk dining, street sales, and again bicycle parking. These are all factors that have been brought to our attention. Key aspect of what we do is transportation modeling. It's critical that we generate credible, timely, policy-sensitive travel forecasts for a strong, systematic, analytical approach for decision-making. Within Hamilton, we are connected to the rest of the region, so there is complex, associated with a complex GTHA transportation system. We're looking at a variety of infrastructure investment. Diverse interest groups are involved. Environmental, economic, and social benefits need to be considered. And again, alternative transportation investments are also important. We work extensively with a number of other groups within Public Works and throughout the rest of the city and the community. Certainly with transit, we look at working on modal splits and increasing ridership and making transit an attractive and convenient alternative. Asset management for helping to determine timing in relation to their needs. Traffic, we work closely with Martin's group for traffic operations and engineering, best practices, traffic calming, and those aspects. For design, right-of-way amenities, and complete streets, as I've just described. Planning and economic development for goods movement and growth management. Public health to help them with the benefits of active transportation and community health. And we'll be attending the Board of Health meeting this afternoon to elaborate on that. Chamber of Commerce, again, our key stakeholders that we deal with to help them with the business aspects. Finance, we get involved in development charges and to determine and help with the best use of capital resources and the timing of expenditures. And on the right, again, we're dealing with provincial ministries, extensively with Metrolinx, other regions and municipalities. We have involvement with the First Nations through the EA process, and again, extensive public engagement process with the communities. Our staff look at 300 plus development applications on an annual basis, so we have a close working relationship with our planning department. We do get down from a strategic transportation master plan area right down to communities, and we work extensively with community programs. You're all familiar with the North End Transportation Management Plan, dealing with 10 streets for traffic calming and pedestrian treatment, and again, as Martin alluded to, currently a 30-kilometer speed limit. And this particular plan it's 5 years as a test, and there are extensive areas that we're involved in with narrowing streets, monitoring streets for cut-through, and various aspects dealing with the community. Staff attend and work with other areas, including the neighborhood action plans. We attend regular meetings, provide comments on transportation planning, connections, and how the network can work more efficiently. As I mentioned, we deal a lot with our public health group. The medical officers of health have just produced several reports looking at substantial changes on the way that people get to work, to school, and everyday destinations. They're looking at how investments are being made, how communities are being planned, the health aspects of chronic disease, environment through emissions and pollution, and again, trying to encourage as many people to walk, cycle, and use public transportation. One of the programs that we use extensively is our Transportation Demand Management Program. And again, we're trying to change or reduce travel demand, particularly with peak commuting hours, instead of increasing the road supply. The TDM makes more efficient use of the current road system for its highest and best use. With the right incentives or disincentives, travelers can be influenced to utilize other ways and contribute less to congestion. So in conclusion, our work deals with all aspects of the city's transportation needs, from the individual needs, community needs, business needs, and inter-regional needs. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. I do have myself on the list. I'm going to ask Councillor Murillo to take the chair, and I have Councillor Jackson. I guess the fundamental question I have, and I've been dealing with the Edmonton on their approach to complete streets, and I guess there's different philosophies and approaches from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. It's clearly not a well-defined position and application. And I think I did forward that report from Edmonton to some of my colleagues. Actually, the question I have is, you talk about the strategy is not about creating congestion, but resolving congestion. I need to, when I go back to my constituency, I need to explain how that could be achieved when you're taking capacity off our roadways, I mean, we just see Hunter now, he closed down a lane, put another bike lane in. Now you're down to 2 lanes. So the question is, if in fact you're taking lanes out to widen sidewalks, create a bus lane, how do I, with any credibility, go to my constituents and say, but this is not about creating congestion? Can you help me with that?
Through the chair, again, the complete streets aspect or philosophy is relatively new to a lot of the municipalities. Again, they're talking about the ability to safely move along and across the streets, and they're also talking about delivering acceptable level of services to all modes. So again, those are the types of things we would want to look at as far as if we're taking away areas or pavement for different uses, then we would have to do that analysis to see if that's a fair approach and achieving the goals that we're trying to achieve. Removing parking, removing lanes for transit, those are all aspects that we would need to evaluate and bring to the community for their input. A lot of the meetings we're attending, people are encouraged by active transportation and transit, but again, they're also wanting to be able to get to their destinations without having congestion. The process with transportation planning is not to get rid of the car. That the car is going to be here for a long time. But again, we're trying to look at a balancing approach to the other users of the road.
Again, I appreciate that. The challenge, again, with any credibility, when you had a report that came forward on the bike lanes on Cannon, and in that report it had indicated we may need to consider another additional bus service on that line because of the delays anticipated as a result of that decision. So if I extrapolate that, it would suggest strongly that any changes that you make with the current constraints that we have in regards to width of roads and so forth, the ultimate impact will be on the automobile.
Through the chair, again, we're trying through various programs and initiatives to have people use other active forms of transportation, such as walking and cycling, such as public transportation, such as telecommuting, and other ways of using the existing infrastructure to its highest and best use, not at the detriment necessarily of creating congestion. We would look at travel times, we would look at intersection capacities, and again, bring forward our rationale for any changes. If it doesn't make sense, if whatever the design is going to cause congestion, we probably wouldn't do that, but then maybe there's other ways that we can provide other forms of transportation that again will lessen the impact on the road.
So help me understand, arterial roads are just that. They're there to move a greater amount of traffic through the city, and then you got internal roads that service those neighborhoods. No question you're going to have arterial roads cutting through neighborhoods. The question is, who has a greater say on the use of those arterial roads that really is part of the city network versus a neighborhood network? Help me understand how the input and the concerns of residents that utilize those arterial roads that go through neighborhoods see dramatic changes that create a hardship for them. How do they get involved in this process?
Well, through the chair, it's a great question, and one of the things that we've looked at for the Cannon Street, and that's the perfect example, is just that. It's something that it's been proposed through the community council, has endorsed it, and it's a pilot. So everything you're asking with respect to the movement and will it cause congestion, will it enhance transit, will all be determined through the pilot. So, this is, because it is a new concept, as Al had indicated, we will continue to monitor it, and, council will have that final say. But again, Cannon and the length of it is an excellent, and it's just that, a pilot to determine doing this. Are we actually making it a complete street, or are we, not achieving that result? So I think once the pilot's done and we report back, that's very important for council to understand.
Thank you. And I think the point I'm making, there's ultimately going to be trade-offs. And currently, what residents see that do not have adequate alternatives is they'll be spending 8-10 days more a year in their vehicle as a result of some of the changes with this approach. We need to be honest and with those residents. And my concern is that the trade-off is, well, we'll tell them that they could take their bicycle or they can take public transit. That's your solution in regards to lessening the congestion. And to me, that's counter to the concerns of the residents that will probably never have the same level of transit in certain geographic areas that rely on those arterial roadways versus those that have access to good transit systems. So I guess my concern is that you can pit one off the other and say, oh yeah, well, we'll get rid of congestion, more people take buses. Well, how's that comforting at this point, at this beginning stages, to the person that knows that they're going to always rely on their vehicle and their vehicle is part of their livelihood? How do I address that with them, that there's no trade-off and that they won't be lost in this process?
Through the chair, yes, there are challenges that we'd be facing bringing forward and investigating these aspects. However, there's potentially opportunities for even a 20% reduction. If someone were to do a different way of traveling 1 day a week, and people that certainly need their car for their job or to commute, that's going to go on for a very long time. It's the other people there we're going to try to, through programs, through incentive programs, to encourage them to take other forms of transportation so that the network is available for those other people. We just think, and we've seen other municipalities with that success, so we'd like to do more investigation in that nature.
So would it be safe to say then that the issue, when you talk about you don't want to create congestion, really it's a tricky comment, because what you're really saying is that the congestion will be created by people that will not use alternatives that you offer.
Through the chair, potentially. Again, if there are people out there, and again, if with the intensification of the downtown in the future, people will be living downtown, transit will be more beneficial to them, the cycling network will be more beneficial to them. So again, that will free up the capacity of the road. There isn't a lot of room to widen, so we're looking at these other alternatives. As far as a complete street, we're not suggesting that every street that we're going to look at from a design point of view get all of these elements. We don't think that that's going to happen. But we think there's opportunities to look at bits and pieces of these to come up with a successful network.
Thank you. So the reason I asked the questions, Alan, I really appreciate the answers. It's a tough one. I understand that. All I'm doing is reflecting all the community meetings I attend. And the erosion and the time that people are starting to find they're spending in their vehicles, whether it's going to TO or now when they're commuting in their own very own community, I think we're making things difficult. And they see it as a social experiment to get rid of the automobile or force them out of their vehicles when they really don't have any alternatives. Some of them are seniors. Some of them are people that work and need to pick up their kids and drop them off at daycare, so transit does not work for them. So there are people that have certain lifestyles that lend them to the fact that they can't utilize transit system, and they're scared to death that their quality of lives could be diminished, not increased, by these actions. And I want to make sure that on a go-forward basis that we really understand. And we don't use excuse, well, they can take an alternative transportation. We're building that into the congestion plan. I really want to know what the impact is without that consideration on the driver in any corridor. So will that be part of the matrix?
If I could, Mr. Chairman, in all cases, the final decision on any redevelopment, any implementation of complete streets, the final decision is always council's. Our job is simply to take a street, a new street or a street that's under refurbishment, and look at all the aspects for all the possible uses on that street, whether it's pedestrian, automobile, transit, whatever the possible uses might be on that street. Look at all of the alternatives, talk to all the affected people, talk to the auto drivers, the commercial, talk to the residents, talk to the cyclists, and simply bring back to council a really thorough, complete package of what the people who use that street, the people who use that street to drive on, would prefer to have on that street. So it's really about having an inventory of options for redevelopment of that street. And it can never and should never be about forcing one mode of transportation over another mode of transportation. That is absolutely the wrong approach. The approach is simply to say we have a number of competing uses for this particular section of roadway, and here is, in our view, the best balance of how those competing needs can be achieved. In some cases, it will be a high pedestrian network. In some cases, it will be a high auto network. In some cases, it will be a high transit. But really, our job is to come back to you and say, we're redeveloping this section of roadway, and we want to bring back to you all the interests of the pedestrians, the cyclists, the automobile users, the transit users, and say, here's the benefits and here's the drawbacks. We will probably rarely be able to bring back to you a perfect solution, but what we would bring back to you is a scenario that hopefully best balances all of the needs of all of the users of the right-of-way in any particular section of the city. And that can change with every development we do, depending on the stakeholders that are in the affected areas. So it would be, just to kind of summarize, it would be an absolutely wrong approach to approach this where we're trying to force one mode of transportation over another. We're trying to find a balance for all transportation needs within a particular section. This isn't pro-transit or pro-automobile. It's finding the best balanced solution for the pedestrian, for the person with disabilities, for the automobile user, for the commercial vehicle, and then bringing that scenario back to you for your consideration. And council will always have the final say. Our job is simply to bring you a complete, comprehensive package to allow you to make a well-informed decision, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and I do appreciate the fact that you're bringing a report back to the committee. But you write the report and you provide the recommendations. So the methodology and how you arrive at those recommendations are paramount to ensure that there's a balance in the approach on those reports that come to council. What I'm trying to highlight, quite frankly, and where it's been lacking, is the time and quality of life issues that impact people that currently rely on the current transportation network we have. And if there's any changes to the time allotment in their cars, for example, then we need to be clearly understanding of what that is, and we should be clearly part of the matrix in making those determinations and recommendations to this council.
You're absolutely correct, Mr. Chairman. It's like a SWOT analysis. You have to know all the benefits and all the drawbacks for all of the potential users of that potential road network, that right-of-way. It should never, and ought never to be, a candy-coated report that lobbies for one particular form of transportation over another. It's all modes of transportation, which ones will be affected positively, which ones will be affected negatively, and should come with a staff recommendation to say, taking all that into account after having surveyed all of the users of this network, this is the best advice we can give you in terms of balancing the use of that right-of-way in that particular scenario, Mr. Chairman.
Appreciate that, and I just wanted to highlight those points. Thank you very much for your answers. I really appreciate them.
Mr. Chairman, we
I'll take the chair back.
Councillor Powers on the list to speak.
Councillor Powers. Oh, sorry, I have Councillor Jackson, then Councillor Powers.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I listened very carefully to your questions and comments. So just a quick opening comment, Alan, then I got a couple of questions for you, Alan. Maybe you could just, Alan, go back as I'm doing my comment to the slide that had there the bold type value about complete streets enhancing property value, please, and I'll get to a question about that. I guess Crockett Street, probably, Mr. Chairman, up in my area back in the 90s, was probably one of the first mountain streets that decided to redesign the road from the top of the Sherman Cut to Upper Gage, and the narrowing that came by way of a petition when Peace Memorial School was still there. And of course, now it's a 5.5-acre park after the school closed, but we did the pinching of the street. We did parking lay-by, so the businesses, small businesses in the area weren't affected negatively. And we did wider sidewalks, but we got no dedicated bus lanes. We got no cycling lanes. I wore a few scars from the traveling community back and forth, but over the last 15, 16 years, it's worked out well. So, Mr. Chairman, I just want to give that as an opening example of one of the first mountain-type conversion streets that, you know, transitionally had some difficulty, but we got there. Now, through you to Alan. On this slide, Alan, I'm very curious. In November, I believe the one-year trial for the dedicated bus lane on King Street will be up. So I guess the study and report will be in for the new council, whoever's here. I hope that kind of commerce and existing business experience with that kind of one-year trial will be paramount in terms of being part and parcel of the report to the new council, because I'm hearing mixed messages, mixed reviews from existing businesses in that corridor. Mr. Chairman, through you to Alan, maybe for a comment, please.
To the chair, yes, that particular report will be coming back after the one-year trial. Again, there are a number of matrices that were included and will be included as far as ridership, as far as travel time for both the transit vehicles and the motorists. And also, I understand that there will be some kind of consultation with their businesses to determine exactly what the impact was and what their opinion was. So that will be brought back for the committee's information.
That's good to hear, Alan, because when you have in that sense, streets design can support commerce, I'm just telling you, I'm just hearing that there's mixed signals from existing businesses with regards to that dedicated bus lane. Just flip over a few more slides, Alan, to your urban planning and transportation about public health, concern for public health. I think it was one of your last slides. Moving forward from there. Perfect. So, Alan, just last question, Mr. Chairman, through you to Alan. By the way, Alan, an excellent presentation. I'm glad you're quarterbacking this and you're at the helm. How do we get the message across that everything we're doing is not anti-car? Because from those of us who represent areas beyond the core, and a lot of this transitional change is happening mostly in the core, but in some other different parts of the city where it's requested or where it may be required or needed. But how do we get the messaging across that it's not all of these changes, what do you want to call them, balanced streets, complete streets, is not anti-car? Mr. Chairman, through to Alan for a comment, please.
Mr. Chair, I mentioned before that the car will be around for a long time. People need it for business. We need roads for the goods movement. So roads will be within the City of Hamilton and play a key role from an economic development point of view, goods movement point of view, and for the residents. Again, our consultation and work with public health, they have a goal of improving the community's health through better walking facilities, better cycling facilities, making use of public transportation, because that's certainly an active way of moving around, and of course the bike racks on all of our buses. So these are all bits and pieces that it's becoming to the forefront of public conversation and public reports, that they want us to look at those aspects of things and include them as often as we can in order, as I said, potentially if people use a different form of transportation such as walking and cycling, that will then free up the road for other users that have to be there. So we see that as part of the balancing network.
So, Alan, I would just, Mr. Chairman, ask that staff and General Manager Davis just keep in mind, if I could, as one member of council, but I don't think I'm alone in this sentiment, whatever we're doing moving forward with balanced streets, complete streets, just keep in mind that we're not sending a message necessarily of we're anti-car. There's a place for the car, and the reality is there's going to be a place for the car for many families, dovetailing on Councillor Whitehead's one point. But as we're trying to live healthier lives, to offer more modes of transportation, that, we're not anti-car. And I think if we can somehow diffuse that perception, I think that would go a long way to get increasing buy-in across the community. I leave the thought with you, Alan. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's a great comment. Any proposal we brought forward that was anti any form of transportation, to me, would be absolutely the wrong direction. What we're trying to do is look at all the stakeholders that use a particular right-of-way and listen to what they have to say, and then redesign the street to the best of our ability, and bring forward a report that's saying, from all the stakeholders that use the street, whether they live there or ride a bicycle or go to school there or got to get through with a transport truck, we've listened and talked to them all. And so we've done a design that we think addresses their concerns to the best of our ability, knowing that rarely we'll have a perfect solution. But you're absolutely correct. The minute that this starts to lobby against one particular form of transportation or lobby for another particular form of transportation, it's lost. That's not what this is about. This is about representing all of the stakeholders, bringing all of the stakeholders' viewpoints to you when we bring a staff report forward for your consideration.
And Don, you're quarterbacking the Rapid Ready report, General Manager Davis, one of the best reports that has ever come forward from this corporation. Thanks, Don. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks for great comments. Councillor Powers.
Right, my comments will be after we receive them.
Thank you. Any further comments on the report? Seeing none, I need a motion to receive. Moved by Councillor Jackson, second by Councillor Powers. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Alan. Now I'll recognize Councillor Powers.
What Alan and the group are doing is something that's taking place across Canada. If we don't stay with it, we'll just be left behind. There's municipalities significantly smaller than ourselves that are adopting what we refer to as the integrated mobility model, where everything is taken into consideration. Your point is very valid. Ultimately, the final decision is made by ourselves. So what we need from our staff is to include all the elements, I'm going to call it the 5 interlocking circles, with the options and what I'm going to say, what the positive and negative impacts on each one of them are, to assist us in making the decision. Notwithstanding, staff can make a recommendation based on their expertise as to where they think we should go. You're right, Councillor, the ultimate decision is ours, and they need to provide us with that balanced report. The Canadian Urban Transit Association, of which Mr. Hull and I are both members of and serve on their committees, has gone from just dealing with, I'm going to call it transit, the operations of streetcars and subways, to where we've adopted the integrated mobility. So the biking linkages, the goods movement, all those things now are important from the standpoint of not only the designs of the roadways, but the modes of transportation, the load factors on the roads, and all those things. Christine Lee Morrison presented at the conference just last week, and substantial uptake. I mean, a committee that I chair, Christine came in and provided an abbreviated presentation, and from the members on my committee, there was great uptake, and in fact, we're going to invite her down to Niagara Falls in November and that to give us the full thing. But I think the onus is upon ourselves is to ensure that each one of those 5 interlocking circles are at least considered, and if there's an element of impact, we need to include it, and whether the impact's positive or negative from that, we need to take into consideration, and ultimately the council makes the final decision, but the staff provide us with, I'm going to call it the balance. What's needed is the balance reporting on all the impacts of all the factors. So I think Al's approach and the group's approach has been the right way, and we're moving with with not only the rest of Canada, but certainly North America on this issue, and some of the European ones are long ahead of us on this already. So thank you, sir.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask Councillor Miller to take the chair. I remember Dr. Longo, Livable Cities, came to the city of Hamilton and did a walk and looked at Jackson Square and asked us when we built it, and then indicated that they had learned, and this was I guess it was a pattern, it was a must-do at the time of urban renewal right across North America, yet Hamilton 10 years later, after they discovered that type of urban renewal doesn't work. So you still have to enter these things with reservation and concern. The point, I went to San Francisco and talked to their urban transit people. I was in New York, talked to them. And what I've discovered is the biggest mistake they believe they made is when they had capacity, they ate up that capacity because to try and create capacity at this point in time is significant cost and expropriation. We are blessed in the city of Hamilton with a greater capacity than need currently. The caution that I heard from them is be careful, because the biggest challenge they have now, and Toronto, you see the biggest debate that's taking place, is congestion. So my big concern is that we're so all in a hurry to eat up the capacity we have, we might find ourselves tomorrow in the same situation as New York, San Francisco, and Toronto, where the automobile is paralyzed in the urban core. And that's not the vision that I have in regards to our transportation network. So any reports coming forward, I would hope they would understand the lessons learned from those other communities and the challenges they have now, because it becomes very expensive to resolve the congestion, and that's the hugest complaint in Toronto right now, is congestion. In fact, they have people going around in sardine costumes because there's not enough public transit. The businesses and the small business are saying they're having trouble getting movement of goods to their businesses. So it's becoming a significant challenge. We're blessed. Let's not use up what we have and following the mistakes of the past. We did that with Jackson Square. I just want to make sure we don't do it on our transportation network. So those are my comments. I'll take back the chair. We have to move the report. Moved by Councillor Ferguson, second by Councillor... the presentation, sorry, which we did. Thank you. Discussions, items. HSR Transcab contract extension with the Hamilton Cab Company, procurement policy number 11, Ward 6, 9, 10, and 11. I'll move it. Councillor Johnson asked me to inform the committee that she supports the recommendation in this report and that she appreciates the work the staff have done on this issue. Is there any discussion on 8.1? I'll move it. Moved by Councillor Jackson, second by Councillor McCaddy. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Churchill Park Land Management Master Plan. Staff have asked to make a clarification here. I understand that Adam Sweetland has clarification he would like to provide. Adam? Councillor McCaddy. Okay.
Sorry, through the chair, that was actually supposed to be 8.5 that I'm going to speak to.
8.2 or 8.5?
8.5, I'd like to make a clarification on.
Okay, so it's the wrong, so Councillor McCaddy. Thank you, Adam.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to thank staff for this report. It's on Churchill Park in Ward 1, and it's been a long process, the longest park master plan, I think, in Hamilton history. It's been going for a number of years now, and it was complicated by by discussions with RBG about possible land transfer as well, which those discussions continue. One of the reasons it took some time is it's in the Niagara Escarpment Commission area, and so they had to be involved as well. But I think it's worthwhile that the time was taken, as we've prepared, we've taken the park master plan and made it into a management plan and incorporated the Niagara Escarpment Commission Parks and Open Space System. It's not zoning, but it's sort of zones, I guess. So they, hopefully when we actually go to implement the park master plan, the Niagara Escarpment Commission will be able to move with us fairly quickly, rather than dealing with each little trail or little change we're going to do on a case-by-case basis and months and more years and take to get fairly straightforward stuff that's been through exhaustive public consultation already. We don't want to hold things up anymore. So I'm happy to see that we've taken the time to have those discussions with the NEC, and hopefully we can move ahead on implementation as fast as possible. I wanted to thank Councillor Powers as well, because the connection to the RBG goes back to his time as the council representative last term of council on the RBG. I'm the representative for council this time around, and the conversations have continued. But Councillor Powers has stayed involved, given his early involvement in beginning those conversations, and he had the history, and now he's it reminds me he's on the Niagara Escarpment Commission too, so he's helped out on that end as well. So a good process, a long one, but I think we've hopefully got the approvals and the buy-in from the other agencies that are involved in the Churchill Park area, and then implementation from here on in will be fairly smooth. Seeing a little nodding of the head there from Lawrence. Thanks, Lawrence, in particular for your guidance. I can tell you the community still speaks about your public meetings and how well they were received in the neighborhood, and how people felt very much heard, and that their comments were incorporated into the overall plan. And Steve, for your guidance as well overall, and work with the NEC. I think it was exemplary work on the part of staff, Mr. Chair. So happy to move this at the appropriate time, and seconded by Councillor Powers.
Thank you. I have no further discussion, so we'll accept that motion now. Second by Councillor Powers. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Now we're at 8.3, quick wins, A-B, line pasture amenities. Is there any discussion on 8.3? Moved by Councillor Bacatti, second by Councillor Jackson. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. 8.4, Woodburn Bridge Environmental Assessment. Is there any discussion on 8.4? Seeing none, moved by Councillor Powers, second by Councillor Ferguson. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Heritage Green, this is the one that we have Adam Sweetland that's going to come forward. It's the Passive Park, former West Quarry Lands funding agreement between the City of Hamilton, New Alta Corporation, and Heritage Green Community Trust. Adam.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just by way of benefit for the committee and for the public record, the park is proposed. I want to expand and clarify on the naming rights as described in the report. The park is proposed to be named the Heritage Green Passive Park. The main trail loop will be named the New Alta Trail. On page 4 in the report, it does say that there will be no more changes made to the name of the park or the trail. In fact, talking with Debbie Edwards and Legal Services, it should be pointed out that, in fact, in theory, the name of the park or the trail could be changed if all parties agree. That's the only point.
Councillor Powers.
Sorry, just help me with this, Adam, is we have a naming policy in the city of Hamilton, so automatically naming it this is something that's kind of foreign to us, is there can be the recommendation that it be named such and such, and it goes to the city's naming facilities naming committee with a recommendation to name that. So can you just help me why the suggestion is contrary to city policy, please? Through you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, through the chair. The actual policy applies to city-owned buildings, structures, and property. This park is the subject of a license agreement between the city and New Alta. So.
See no further questions. Moved by Councillor Power, second by Councillor Collins. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. 8.6, sidewalk construction policy, California curbs. Is there any discussion on 8.6? Councillor Jackson.
Chairman, I just want to make sure that continuing on with this California sidewalk curb approach doesn't lead to the aforementioned mountable curb problem that we had from the 1980s that Paul McShane has finally, through his excellent work, caught up on replacing, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Director Gary Moore, please, for a comment. Just tell me this will not lead to any more mountable curbs.
Through the chair, the mountable curb was a unique
mistake
problem to say the least. The California curb is the California approach that we use at the various driveways is a very prominent standard, not only across Ontario but across North America. It predominantly favors the pedestrian in that it maintains the slope of the sidewalk through the approach. The problem that sometimes you get with the California approach is that you get the roller coaster effect because you're lowering the you're lowering the sidewalk to meet each driveway. The antithesis of that is maintaining the sidewalk and dipping at each, dipping the sidewalk crossways at each driveway to more favor the car at those locations. So it's balancing the difference of the two. The new standard in all the new developments is with the boulevard, which eliminates both of those problems because you create a proper standard for the car to go from the roadway into the driveway while maintaining the sidewalk and no deviations in grade. The choice between the two we have right now is in retrofit situations on a lot of the older neighborhoods where we don't have wide enough sidewalks. Right now, there's a lot of the old neighborhoods only have 1.2 meter wide sidewalks. We try to go to the 1.5 or even 2 meter wide sidewalks in order to favor the pedestrian, and we have to somehow create a favorable driveway approach, and those are the two that we're using. So I don't anticipate that the California is going to be a mountable curb type of issue. We do have to go back from time to time and redo a driveway approach, but it's mostly for the homeowner and not for the pedestrian.
Gary, that was a long answer, and I'm perspiring. So Gary, it says here you're maximizing the benefit to the pedestrian, and I get that pedestrians should always come first, whether they're crossing a road, whatever. But I'm just getting a little nervous now because I don't want to go ahead with this and say I supported this. And as you're doing all these, whether you're replacing and or building anew, and I'm getting a whole host of new constituents, like the hundreds we had from the mountable curb list. You were so aware of that and took a number of us, like Councillor Collins, myself, Councillor DeVal, Whitehead, maybe about 10 years to finally get caught up on the replacement. I just don't want to build these, and then I'm getting a bunch of homeowners calling me saying, Tom, you know what, the way you've lowered the sidewalk now, my car's bottoming out, it's uneven for my vehicle to get in, and I'm just trying to, I'm speaking only as a layman, Gary, I'm just trying to avoid that, prevent that in the future, and you're not raising my comfort level right now. I wish I could go out with you before voting on this and see, Tom, here's what you got now, here's what we're proposing, and Mr. Chairman, through you to Gary for a further comment, I'd feel a lot more comfortable at least seeing the distinction between what you want to do here, more pedestrian friendly, versus what has been. Mr. Chairman, through you to Gary, please. I'm not trying to complicate your life, Gary, but you're kind of complicating mine possibly.
So through the chair, what we want to do is we want to talk to the councillors more before we
implement anything, either one of these.
Okay.
Because we understand that there is a trade-off between the homeowner's requirement to have a smooth approach and the pedestrians' movement throughout the neighborhood. It is a very difficult trade-off at times, depending on the nature of the neighborhood. We'd like to implement boulevards everywhere, but it's, in some neighborhoods, it's not realistic. If we were reconstructing an area where it had the mountable curb right now, we'd be removing the mountable curb. However, the mountable curb is the most pedestrian-friendly way to go in every neighborhood. It does not deviate, it does not, every driveway, it's exactly the same. When we change those mountable curbs and put it in favor of the driveway, it is not in favor of the pedestrian. It is in favor of the driveway. So,
But Gary, you know the hundreds of thousands of dollars we've spent because of the constant claims from motorists, Gary, with those mountable curbs.
which is through the chair, which is the challenge of staff to try and meet that balance, because it is a balance, and it is a very fine balance between the pedestrian and the requirement of the homeowner. So we have standards, we have different approaches to use. We'll have all these tools at our hand. We're just, this recommendation is more about letting council know that we're more cognizant of that balance, and we'll bring that to you before we simply implement something on the neighborhood.
I'll wait to hear from the rest of my colleagues, Gary. Thanks for your attempt to try to raise my comfort level. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I have Councillor McCaddy, Councillor Ferguson. Is there anyone missing on the list? Councillor McCaddy.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And this is in response to a motion that I moved asking about California curbs. And it was a concern that was raised by a number of citizens. And it was, as Gary suggests, a situation where people are walking along the sidewalk, and due to the narrow nature of the sidewalk and the older neighborhoods in particular, they have to dip down. The roller coaster reference, I think, that Gary provided, they have to dip down as if they're walking two people, mainly. The person on the inside, on the roadside, has to sort of dip down, and it's not so great for seniors who are not as good on their pins as others. And in the wintertime, sometimes because of that dip area, the water does pool, and it can freeze and ice up in that area, so it's a problem. But I think Gary has done a great job explaining, I'll just call it the realities of the geometry of the different neighborhoods. The one I walk almost every day is on Hunter Street between Locke Street and Queen, and the front yards are about a meter wide, and you've got the sidewalk, and what is it, 1.2 meters then, I guess, and then you've got the road right there. So there's just absolutely zero room. There's no boulevard, whereas in other neighborhoods there is a little bit of a boulevard, so we can get a flat sidewalk, and then we can go down to the road with the driveway approach. So it is just a geometry issue. Gary's explained that to me in emails and probably verbally before, but this is exceptionally helpful to have the report in front of us that citizens can have to read and to understand. It's a hard concept to understand, and they'll continue to say, well, we don't like them. And I said, well, I totally agree with you. But it's just one of those geometry issues that there's simply no option. Maybe I'll just check in with Gary just to make sure I read it correctly and understood his previous comments correctly. It's just a function of zero option in some of the old areas that I just described, the Hunter Street example. Mr. Chair, through you.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. I mean, we'll look at other things. I mean, if we can narrow up the road and get an extra half a meter to make the sidewalk narrow or wider, which provides a wider walking area, if we can take it back a little bit through our property, we'll look at those things more diligent, maybe from now on type of thing. Make sure that the contractor's building them exactly to standard, so that if it's supposed to be 900 millimeters wide, we get the 900 millimeter wide platform. It is we are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on the mountain to accommodate the driveways. So it is a fine balance between the pedestrian and the entranceway for the homeowner, so that we try to do the best we can, and sometimes there just isn't an option.
Mr. Chair, I'll just finish up by saying recommendation B, that in sidewalk retrofit situations, the area councillor be advised of choices being recommended when a standard needs to be modified. I think that's the kind of thing we want to see as a council, is that communication back and forth, because we end up getting the complaints or the questions or the comments from citizens, and then we have to be the city engineer trying to explain the situation. So having that opportunity to work with staff when changes are made is particularly helpful. So I just want to thank Gary and the team for the report this morning.
Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, there's been a lot written and sang about and songs put together about California girls, and I'm just as supportive of California curbs. They're the right solution. I'm jealous of my good friend from Ward 6 if he's got his manageable curbs all fixed, because we don't. We put a limited number of funds aside to depress those curbs and to avoid bottoming out when their cars are trying to mount them. And this actually protrudes out about, well, it's 250 millimeters into the road to have a nice slope up. There still is a flat spot, even on a 1.2 meter walk of about 600 millimeters, where you can, if you don't want to walk through that depression, you can stay on the high side and not have to take the risk if you're a senior. And if there's a windrow of snow that's blocking up snow and creating water, once again, you go to the high side and it'll be dry. It is the right solution for our sidewalks. It's not easy to build, but it's the right solution. You know, the cars are getting smaller and sitting lower and sleeker to try to save fuels, and the manageable curbs are just more and more of a problem. So I'm very supportive of the whole report. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Powers.
I'm going to echo my colleagues, and I think it's the right direction. Probably like all the councillors, I've had ones that we've, I mean, I used some of the dollars out of the investment that we made for sidewalks and curb replacement in order to put them in. The movement now, and I found it particularly now with families who have children, kind of the new strollers, and they're a wider base and they're a longer. The dynamics of those just have changed, and you know, Sydenham Street was one we did one where, you know, literally, in order to balance it, you had to balance the stroller on two wheels in order to keep two of them from tipping down into the, I'm going to call it, down into the gully that took you down to the road. So I think what's here in the locations that we're able to do it is a strategically good move. The pictures are good. I think one of the things perhaps we need from an information standpoint is we need to kind of take these pictures and provide some, you know, currently what there is before and after shots as to what we're proposing to make people a little bit more comfortable as to what we're suggesting for changes in that. But I'm supportive of the recommendation, and we move ahead where we're able to, either in programs or if there's funds that the ward councillors want to invest, you know, back into their sidewalks replacement program.
Thank you. Councillor Collins. No, I'm good. I'll take to pass the chair on to Councillor Powers. I guess my concern, and that's why I'm having trouble supporting this, is that we spend oodles of dollars in fixing a problem, and I'm currently still getting new people adding to the list in regards to the mountable curbs. Walkers are homeowners, certainly on the mountain. Majority of them are. So clearly, whatever solution in regards to the sidewalk is something that impacts their home. I would strongly suggest that the homeowners that I've talked to and many of the phone calls I get and continue to get are not supporters of mountable curbs, period. That's why we're getting rid of them. I don't know how much money we spent to date. So I'm having trouble understanding how you could have a second policy saying if you want to create a mountable curb, just contact us while we're getting rid of them. So can I ask staff, wouldn't that be contradictory to why we're getting rid of mountable curbs is to ensure that that people have safe access to their homes and egress and egress. This would be reversing that by having a policy that says, we want to, I believe you're looking at leveling the sidewalk, which means you're going to have a greater hump. So that's completely opposite what we've been trying to resolve relative to the mountable curbs. Is that not correct?
Through the chair, each of these approaches requires various amounts of work on the driveway. Where the standard approach holds the back of curb, we can simply, it minimizes the amount of work we have to do on private driveways. Where the California, if we're lowering that sidewalk down, then we have to do quite a bit of work on the driveway to maintain a very good approach. The California is flatter, wider, would accommodate the strollers better, where the standard approach, while it provides a walkway, is probably more effective when we go in, more efficient from a cost perspective when we go into a neighborhood. But both ways do provide good access to the driveway, as well as the pedestrian. It's just a matter of which one we're using where and how we're using it and the extent of work beyond that.
Yeah, I think that's my point. We either have a corporate standard or we don't. So help me understand what the corporate standard is. It's going to be a two-sided corporate standard that we're going to have, so California curbs and whatever the other one is called, mountable curbs. We'll have a double standard in regards to sidewalks, or we're going to have one standard?
Through the chair, no, there's no mountable curbs. It's the standard approach, which is predominantly in the what exists today in the older neighborhoods, or the California approach. Both these are when the sidewalk is adjacent to the road. If we had, for instance, a concrete impressed driveway that came out to the back of the curb, if we use the California, then we may be cutting that back 10 or 15 feet, which is, tens of thousands of dollars, and you're not going to be able to replace it and match it what the homeowner is. The standard approach allows us to hold the driveway and put a proper approach in. So there are some locations where we actually have a combination of these two. We need both in order to have that flexibility to deal with both the pedestrians' needs and the driveway needs.
Okay, so I understand that. It seems to me then we're going to have a patchwork in the city where pedestrians will be looking and visiting a friend and having one experience, and in front of their home they'll have a different experience, and now you will have a patchwork network of standard and California curbs. Is that a good way for a city to go?
Through the chair, it's just the way it has to be. Unless we're prepared to take property, cut down trees, and create boulevards, that there is no alternative.
Thank you. Those are my questions. I'll take the chair back. Councillor Powers.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Councillor Powers.
Councilman Caddy, was it?
No, go ahead.
Okay. I have a suggestion for the motion, and I think the point made by Mr. Moore is very appropriate. Perhaps in B, we might want to make a small modification. So the motion would read that in sidewalk retrofit situations, the area councilor be advised of choices being recommended where a standard needs to be and can be modified. Because, so I'm just suggesting that perhaps that additional verbiage is there, and I'll speak to it when the main motion's offered up.
Thank you. So, Councillor McCaddy, you want to move the report as is. Would you accept that as a friendly amendment? Madam Clerk, could you make sure that's part of the, incorporated as part of the amendment of the main motion? Thank you. Councillor Powers.
Just speaking to that is I think Mr. Moore has made the point, and I can certainly give some examples in my ward where it's a well-established old residential area that not only the topography, but the way that the roads bend and stuff like that, in some cases it's virtually impossible to introduce a California curb, yet to ensure that vehicles can safely and adequately access their garages, driveways without damaging them, it's better to leave the old conventional one rather than replace it. So my suggestion is, the situation will determine the, the best, I'm going to call it the best approach, literally and figuratively.
Thank you. Absolutely. So moved by Councillor Powers, second by Councillor Jackson. All those in favor? Any opposed? On the main motion as amended, moved by Councillor McCaddy, second by Councillor Ferguson. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Now we're on motions. 9.1, motion for tree removal, 314.
We need to go the added items.
Oh, sorry.
8.7.
We have 8.7 and 8.8. Those are the additional items. One is the report. We need a motion to receive. 8 point, that's the site. Delegate site conditions. Authority for records of site conditions. So what's the wish of the committee on 8.7? It's just receive. It's an information receive. Moved by Councillor Jackson, second by Councillor Collins. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Now, on the actual motion, which is before us, on a yellow sheet, I believe, and the motion reads, well, it's before you, so I don't need to read it. I need a mover and a seconder on the motion. Moved by Councillor Powers, second by Councillor Collins. Any further discussion? Yeah, that's it. Sorry, I thought that was in front of you. So currently it is moved by Councillor Powers and second by Councillor Collins.
What I'm moving is, as I recall, there was a referral back to get clarity on whether it's all properties or whether it was exclusively to be City of Hamilton owned properties. The clarity is we've added the words for City of Hamilton owned. The responsibility then will vest with the other people in order to submit their site plans on the basis of what they're going for, whether it's a demolition, whether it's a new construction, whatever the case is.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. So now we're at, that was 8.8. So now we're at motions, correct? Madam Clerk? I don't know, any other ones that didn't miss the directions? Okay, so we're at 9.1. That's for tree removal at 314 East 31st Street. Councillor Jackson.
Mr. Chairman, moved by myself, seconded by Ward 13 Councillor Russ Powers. It's there before you. I had it as a notice of motion. And again, the homeowner is extremely pleased that hopefully we'll get this approved. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Motion for rules of order to be waived to allow a motion to reconsider the removal of outstanding business list. Councillor Collins, your motion, please.
I do, Mr. Chairman, and I would move then to waive the rules of order.
Moved by Councillor Collins, second by Councillor Powers to move the waive the rules of order. All those in favor?
Carried.
Any opposed? Carried.
And this is on behalf of Councillor Morrow, Mr. Chairman. I agreed to move this, and as I understand it, both 9.3 and 9.4 deal with two-way conversions that were lumped in with the Downtown Transportation Master Plan update that will come back at some point in time in the future. And as you know, delegations were made, well, today Sanford was referenced, and Mr. Mankia, who's developing the former Studebaker plant, has requested and was hoping, as I understand it through Councillor Morrow, that the contamination, the contaminants from the Studebaker plant would be able to move in a two-way process to Burlington Street rather than through the neighborhood for the Victoria Street. So I know I've jumped ahead to 9.4, but these are both on behalf of Councillor Morrow, and I know that he's dealing with not just neighborhoods, but in 9.4, he's dealing with Mr. Mankia, who is developing the Studebaker plant. So certainly treat these as separate, but I'm moving them on Councillor Morrow's behalf. As I understand it, 9.4, the applicant is hoping that something comes back as soon as possible.
Thank you. I'm going to pass the chair on to Councillor Powers. I have no problem with 9.4. That's the Studebaker. They made it clear that they needed that conversion to facilitate the development of that area. I'm trying to understand how we're picking 9.3, and that is, I'm just having the debate over both items because they're both about the same issue. So 9.4 I have no problem with. 9.3 3, it seems that there isn't any emergency merging issues. Can I ask staff?
This was an issue first presented by Councillor Morelli many years ago. We actually wrote the report and then essentially put it on the shelf once council resolved to move forward in the direction they did with the 9 outstanding two-way street conversions in the Transportation Master Plan. So we're equipped to bring that back, Mr. Chairman. In fact, both of these reports have already been written, and we'd be happy to bring them back at your convenience.
Okay, so help me understand this then. Was this on that one of those 9?
It was not one of the 9, but it pre-existed. It was a pre-existing direction that Councillor Morelli had brought forward. So these were kind of two dangling issues left out there. And as I say, we had both reports actually have been written and just put on the shelf, so we could turn both around in a very timely fashion, if you wish, Mr. Chairman.
So help me understand my purpose of throwing it into the Master Transportation Plan, so we had a better idea of the impact. This is a one-off again, and this is not being tied into the Master Transportation Plan relative to the wider implications within our network. This is very site-specific. Help me understand how those broader issues could be addressed by dealing with this outside the Master Transportation Plan.
These are two exceptional ones that predated any of the council discussion on two-way street conversion. The impact on Wentworth Street, providing we do only the smaller section that we've already talked about, is nominal, will not have a significant impact outside that area. These are literally two items that were left dangling. They've been on the agenda now for a number of years, and both we feel can be cleaned up to the satisfaction of council, and while recognizing your concern that we're now reintroducing after having made a decision, but these predated that decision of council. So both of these can be accommodated in a reasonable time frame without broad implication on the rest of the network, Mr. Chairman, if that is your wish. They only exist because they're historical in their nature. They've been around for a number of years.
Can I ask, Madam Clerk, is there, since we asked everything but the 9 that were already approved to go back into the Master Transportation Plan, would this require a 2/3 vote?
No, it was in the information section of this Public Works decision, so it wouldn't have to be reconsidered.
So help me understand this, because at council we approved that the ones on the list would go forward, and everything else would be tied into the Master Transportation Plan. So this is counter to the spirit and the principle of that motion.
Now, staff did indicate that it was permission for it to be removed from the Public Works OBL, but Councillor Morrow, through Councillor Collins, is just simply asking for it to come back on. And since that's an information section change, it's not a council reconsideration.
Well, okay, help me out. So what we're asking here is to advance the report and the study on Wentworth, yet we have a counter motion that says that by council, that everything needs to go to through the Master Transportation Plan. So we got a conflict.
Procedurally, it can be done this way. It's just in terms of if that's something committee agrees to, if they want it added or not. It's not a reconsideration.
I just wanted to confirm that it is procedurally in order.
Yes,
Which
it
is
is.
confirmed. Okay.
Okay, well, I'll take offline. I'm having real trouble understanding how a committee could pull something from a council resolution and be completely contrary to that council resolution.
It wasn't pulled from council. It was from a PW report 2 meetings ago. It was to take it off the OBL, so it's simply to put it back on the OBL. It wasn't a council reconsideration. It's just within Public Works.
So help me. So we're asking for that report to come back sooner than was contemplated under the resolution that went to council.
They're two separate.
Well, actually, I moved the motion, and the motion I moved contemplated exempting the 9 and everything else being folded into the Master Transportation Plan, so we would understand in the overall network, citywide network, the implications of such changes. I'm trying to understand how I could find myself in a situation that the very spirit and the intent of council, which was approved, is now going back to, because something was remaining on a public works information piece, is outside of that process.
Take that part of it offline and get clarity and decide whether we want to move ahead with the item before us here at the pleasure of committee. But,
yeah, could I just ask that we can, I mean, this could go forward to council, we can get clarification before council on it, so I don't want to delay it. If procedurally I'm here, it's correct, I'm really having trouble understanding how it could be. Just 9.3, correct. 9.4 I have absolutely no problem with. In fact, I supported it at committee, and it makes a heck of a lot of sense. So those are my comments on 9.3, but 9.4, if we could just park 9.3 until we get absolute clarity on my concern, we can deal with that at council. On 9.4, I'm prepared to move ahead on that as ASP. The chair, Councillor Collins. Councillor McCaddy. So on 9.3, all those in favor? All those opposed? And I will still check technically if this is rightfully in front of us. 9.4?
I will move to waive the rules.
Second by Councillor Powers. All those in favor?
And for the reasons that I stated earlier, Mr. Chairman, I would move it if I have a seconder.
I'll second. I can second, right? I'll second it. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Notice of motions. Item 10.1 is a notice of motion from Councillor McCaddy respecting lease-free dog park at Cathedral Park.
And Mr. Chair, I would move to waive the rules this morning, second by Councillor Jackson.
All those in favor?
Carried.
Any opposed? Carried.
And moved by myself, second by Councillor Jackson, leash-free dog park at Cathedral Park. That's behind Fortino's on King and Main there off Dundurn. And that this is just to formalize it. We have to formalize all our leash-free parks through a bylaw. And that's what this is.
Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Any opposed? Carried. Councillor Jackson, you have a notice of motion.
Mr. Chairman, both on 10.2 and 10.3, and I'm only asking the committee's indulgence to waive the rules only because I understand the July Public Works Committee meeting has been canceled and it's all going to be lumped into the council meeting the week of July. So moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Russ Powers to waive the rules on 10.2.
You want to waive on both?
On both, 10.2
okay, we could do that. So let's just cover both at the same time. All
Please.
Those in favor?
Carried.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Moved by myself, seconded by Ward 13 Councillor Russ Powers. One is come through the neighborhood as and staff supports the installation of the stop control at Kingsview Old Mud, and the other one again is because of all the cost and casualty and heartache that the tree currently has caused at 33 Sherrill Avenue. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Powers on both.
All in any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Carried.
Any
Thank you,
opposed?
Mr. Chairman.
Carried.
Thank you.
Now, general information and business. Items for approval of removal from the outstanding business list. May I have a motion to approve 11.1A, numbers 1 through 4, respecting the items for removal from the outstanding business list. Moved by Councillor Powers, second by Councillor Ferguson. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. We have a private confidential piece at this point. So the committee is required to move into closed session to consider report CMO 14009 PW 14068 respecting HR arbitration and transportation division review. This is pursuant to subsections D and B of the Municipal Act 2001 and subsections 8.1 B and D of the procedural bylaw, as the subject matter pertains to personal matters about identifiable individuals and is subject to labor relations or employee negotiations. Moved by Councillor Jackson, second by Councillor Powers to go on camera. All those in favor?
Carried.